It's that card girl, and today we're going to be taking a look at the One Piece card game's Yellow Egghead Starter Deck, aka Starter 29. As you can tell from the outside of the box, this is another Monkey.D.Luffy leader, and I say another because there are over a dozen Monkey.D.Luffy leader cards. But let's go ahead and get this box opened up so we can check out this deck. Inside the box, we have our deck sandwich safely nestled inside of the packaging. And as always, staying behind in the box was our quick start guide. We have our Monkey.D.Luffy leader greeting us on the top of the deck. And underneath it is our bonus pack, which has 3 alt art versions of the cards inside the deck. But we'll set that aside and take a look at it later. For now, let's get to looking at this starter deck. Our deck sandwich is nicely wrapped up in protective plastic, but let's go ahead and get that taken off. On the very top, we have our yellow 6 life 5k power Monkey.D.Luffy leader. Then there is 2 copies of the 4 cost 5000 power Sanji with a 1k counter. 2 copies of the 6 cost 8000 power Rowana Zoro. 4 copies of the 3 cost 4k power Usopp with a 1k counter. 4 copies of the 4 cost 5000 power Kaku with a 1k counter. 2 copies of the 6 cost 5000 power Jinbei with a 2k counter. 4 copies of the 6 cost 7k Stussy with a 2k counter. 2 copies of the 4 cost 5k Tony Chopper with a 1k counter. 2 copies of the 3 cost 1000 power Nami with a 1k counter. 4 copies of the 5 cost 6k Frankie with a 2k counter. 4 copies of the 2 cost 2k Brook with a 1k counter. 4 copies of the 1 cost no power Monkey.D.Luffy with a 1k counter. 2 copies of the 4 cost 2000 power Nico Robin with a 2k counter. 4 copies of the 5 cost 6k power Rob Lucci with a 1k counter. And on to our events, we have 4 copies of the 1 cost Raw Heat Strike. 2 copies of 1 cost Kizaru. Compared to 2 years ago, we are 100 times stronger now. 4 copies of the 2 cost Aya Death Lion Song. And, of course, our 10 Dawn cards. So, we have our Dawn card, our leader, and our 50 card deck, but what do they all do? Well, our leader Luffy is an Egghead type, the 4 Emperors type, and Straw Hat Crew type, and has 6 life. It lets you draw a card and trash a card from your hand when you have 2 or less life cards whenever you're attacking. Sanji and Zoro are our 2 SRs for the deck. Sanji is a great searcher card. Whenever you play him, you look at the top 4 cards from your deck, find a Straw Hat Crew type card, and add it to your hand. And then the rest of the cards go to the bottom of your deck in whatever order you want. If you get Sanji from your life cards, the trigger lets you trash a card from your hand to be able to play this card. Zoro has Rush, and once per turn, you can trash a trigger card from your hand to be able to draw a card and give Arrested Dawn to your leader or a character. Usopp's effect can be used whenever you play him and whenever you're attacking with him, and it lets you rest one of your opponent's characters that's cost is the same number or less than however many life cards your opponent has. So if your opponent still has all 5 of their life cards, you can rest a 5 cost or less character of theirs. And speaking of the number of life cards your opponent has, with Kaku, if you have the same number or less life cards than your opponent, it gets an extra 1k power, making this a 6k power character. And if you get this one from your life cards, the trigger lets you KO an opponent's character that costs 3 or less. And speaking of KOing characters, you get Tony Chopper's effect when he's KO'd. You add the top or bottom card of your life cards to your hand, and then you get to add a card from your hand to the top of your life cards. So if you have a card in your hand that you'd really rather have the trigger for, this is a great card to make that happen. And Tony Chopper's trigger lets you give any one of your Monkey.D.Luffy cards 2,000 power, so that can be your leader or any of your cards named Monkey.D.Luffy. Nami lets you save an Egghead type character from being KO'd, because if an opponent's effect would KO an Egghead type character, instead you can just turn the top of your life cards face up. If you pull this Nami from your life cards, then you get to just play it because our leader is Monkey.D.Luffy. And speaking of Monkey.D.Luffy, if you're thinking that a no power Luffy has no place in your deck, think again because it is great for moving Dawn around. Once per turn during your main phase, this card lets you give Arrested Dawn to one of your Monkey.D.Luffys. And this game has so many Luffy cards. And the trigger for this one lets you just play the card. Brook and Nico Robin are both blockers, although Nico Robin does have a trigger letting you play this card since our leader is Monkey.D.Luffy. Jinbei and Rob Lucci both don't have any effects during the main phase, but they have triggers. Jinbei you get to play whenever you draw it from your life because our leader is Monkey.D.Luffy, and Rob Lucci has you doing a bit of quick math because you're going to need to add up how many life you and your opponent have together, because then you get to KO one of your opponent's characters whose cost is equal to or less than that. So if you have 4 life and your opponent has 3, then you get to KO a 7 cost or less character of your opponent. Stussy and Frankie are both just basic cards. Now, let's move on to event cards. Raw Heat Strike is a counter letting you give your leader or one of your characters an additional 2k power for the battle. And if you have 1 or less life cards, you get to give your opponent's leader or character minus 2k power. And that definitely can change the outcome of a battle for just 1 Dawn. Aya Death Lion Song is also a counter that lets you give a character of yours or your leader an additional 4k power for the battle. And if you have 2 or less life cards, one of your opponent's characters that has a cost of 3 or less, you get to KO. And this one also has a trigger letting you draw 2 cards and then trash 1. Kizaru, compared to 2 years ago where 100 times stronger now, has a very long title but very simple effects. You can use it during your main phase to give your Monkey.D.Luffy leader unblockable, or you can use it as a counter to give your Monkey.D.Luffy leader an additional 3k power for the battle. Now, that is all of the cards that came included in the deck, so let's talk about some upgrades. Starting with the 3-cost 4,000 life Jewelry Bonnie that has a 1k counter and comes from OP08. If you attach 1 Dawn to this, one time during your turn, you can draw 2 cards and trash 1 card out of your hand when your opponent has a life card removed. And speaking of life cards being removed, the trigger for this card also lets you draw 2 cards and trash 1. Nami here from OP08 has a cost of 5, 5k power, and a 1k counter. If you so choose when you play Nami, you can trash a card with a trigger to be able to KO a 5 cost or less character of your opponent's. And if you've done that, you can draw a card if you've ended up with 3 or few cards in your hand. Its trigger does the same thing. Jewelry Bonnie comes from OP13, has a cost of 9 and 10k power. When you play this Bonnie, since our Luffy leader is Egghead type, she has Rush and your opponent has to add the top life card to their hand. If you draw this card from your life cards, you can rest a 7 cost or less character of your opponent's than if you have 1 or less life cards. This 3k 5 cost Lilith from OP07 is a great searcher for this deck. When you play her, you search the top 5 cards of your deck for an Egghead type besides one named Lilith to reveal and add to your hand. The rest go in any order to the bottom of your deck. Now, our Luffy leader is not Vegapunk, so the trigger for this card did not apply. Nico Robin is 6 cost, 6k power, has a 1k counter, and comes from OP09. If your opponent has 3 or more life cards when you play this card, they have to trash their top life card. If you draw this card from your life cards, its trigger lets you play a 3 cost or less yellow character from your hand. The 1 cost 2k power 1k counter Lilith from OP13 is an on-play searcher just like the other Lilith from OP07. However, this one has you looking at the top 4 cards of your deck to reveal and add to your hand a card with a trigger besides one named Lilith. And then you put the rest at the bottom of your deck in whatever order you want. The trigger for this card lets you do the same thing. S-Snake has a cost of 5, is 6,000 power, and has a 1k counter. The first S-Snake we're talking about is an SR from OP08. When played, a 6 cost or less character of your opponent, besides a Monkey.D.Luffy, is not able to attack until the end of your opponent's next turn. And the same thing happens as a result of the trigger for this card. Stussy from OP13 is 7 cost, 7k blocker with an on-play effect that lets you play a 5 cost or less card with a trigger out of your hand since our leader is an Egghead type. Our second S-Snake is a rare from OP13. It's 4 cost, 5k power, and has a 1k counter. It lets you give an opponent's character minus 2k power for the turn if you're willing to turn your top life card face up. You can do this when you play the card and when attacking. If this card comes from your life cards, its trigger has you trash 1 card from your hand to be able to play it. Kuma here is from OP12, has a cost of 6, 7k power, and a 1k counter. When you play this card, you can trash a card from your hand to be able to add your deck's top card to the top of your life cards, and then this character becomes an 8 cost until the end of the next end phase of your opponent's. During your opponent's turn, if Kuma is KO'd, you get to add your deck's top card to the top of your life. York is from OP07, costs 5, has 6k power, and a 1k counter. When you play this card, if you add your top or bottom life card to your hand, you can KO a 2 cost or less character of your opponent's. The trigger doesn't apply for this deck because we've got the Luffy leader, not Vegapunk. The OP10 Eustace Captain Kidd is 8 cost and has 9,000 power. When you play him, if you immediately rest him, you get to trash your opponent's top life card. At the end of your turn, you get to draw a card and then trash a card from your hand if your opponent has 2 or less life. Now, let's talk about the Egghead stage card that's from OP07. It's 2 cost to get it on the board, although its trigger lets you play it. But what does it do? Well, at the end of your turn, so long as you have 3 or less life cards, you get to set a 5 cost or less Egghead type character as active. Now, for events, we've got the 2 cost paper art after image from OP13. It's a counter event that lets you give 3k power to your leader or a character. If your opponent has 2 or less life cards left, you can give a character or leader of yours another 1k power for the turn. So for 2 cost, this counter card can get you an extra 4k power to one of your cards. Not bad at all. The life draw trigger for this card just lets you draw 1 card. The 2 cost Flame Dragon King event from Starter Deck 13 is another counter. It gives your leader or one of your characters an additional 4k power for the battle and then lets you look at all your life cards and then put them back in whatever order you want. Super helpful for sure. And if you draw this card from your life cards, its trigger lets you add your top or bottom life card to your hand and then put a card from your hand on the top of your life cards. So if there's a card in your hand you're really wanting the trigger for, this can definitely help with that. And this is one of the few cards that I can't decide if I like its main effect or its trigger better, to be honest. You're the One Who Should Disappear is an event from OP06. It's used as a counter and it does not cost any Dawn to use, but you do have to trash a card from your hand to be able to give 3k power to your leader or a character. The life draw trigger only works if this card was your last life card because it lets you add your deck's top card to your life and then trash a card from your hand. You just have to have 0 life cards left to do it. Blaze Slice is a 1-cost event card that is from OP07. It can be used during your main phase or as a counter to give your leader or a character 1k power. And then you get to rest a 4-cost or less character of your opponent's so long as your opponent has 2 or less life. The trigger for this card just lets you rest a 4-cost or less character from your opponent. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you here. Hans had this deck video ready for a while, but I was taking a bit longer than I should have to get the script together for it. And while I was procrastinating, OP15, which contains the yellow cards from EV04, was released. So now let's take a look at some cards from OP15 that would make good upgrades for this starter deck. Like the 5-cost 6k Borsalino with a 1k counter. He's a blocker, and when you play him, you add the top card of your deck to your life cards if you have 2 or fewer life cards. The 1-cost event Gum Gum Golden Rifle can be used during your main phase since our leader Luffy does have Straw Hat Crew as one of his types. You trash the top card from your life, add the top card from your deck to your life, and then trash a card from your hand. This one would be really good to use if you've used another card that lets you know what card you've got coming up next in your deck and you really want its trigger. You can also use Gum Gum Golden Rifle as a counter card to give your leader an additional 4k power for the battle. Now let's talk about a couple Luffys, starting with the 5-cost Luffy with 7k power. If you got at least 6 Dawn on your field, which to play this without using another card's effect you have to have at least 5 since it is a 5-cost, but anyways, if you have at least 6 Dawn, it gets Rush. And if your opponent uses an event or a blocker, you can reveal the top card from your life cards. And this Luffy will get 1k power for each cost of the revealed card. That extra power will last the whole turn. So if you have a 5-cost card on the top of your life, this Luffy is getting an extra 5k power, making it a 12k. And speaking of 12k, we have the 12k power 10-cost Luffy. Although if you're down to 1 life or less, it is only a 9-cost in your hand. So long as you trash a card from your hand when you play this Luffy, he becomes a blocker until the very end of your opponent's next turn, and your leader has an extra 2k power until then as well. Now, we've talked about the deck and we've talked about quite a few different upgrade options for it. So I think it is finally time to open our 3-card bonus pack. This pack has 3 alt art versions of cards that are available in this deck. So let's see what 3 we get. We got Kaku for our first alt. Let's see what our next one is. The leader Luffy himself. Okay, I'm gonna be honest. After pulling the alt leader, I think whatever this 3rd card is gonna be a bit of a letdown. And it's Jinbei, which I feel like Hans and I get a lot of alt Jinbeis, but we definitely cannot complain after getting Luffy out of our bonus pack. Like, comment, subscribe, and let your local farm stand know about us. That Card Girl out!